They don't look like weapons. They don't move like tanks. And most people drive past them without even blinking. But inside these cold, silent buildings, the next war is already being fought. Not with missiles, but with megabytes. Not with soldiers, but with servers. Because today, the real front lines of power aren't on battlefields, they are in data centers. And if you think that's just about storing cat videos and email backups, think again. These buildings are the new military bases of the digital age. And the empire they serve, it's global, invisible, and most powerful than any single government. Let's start with something that seems obvious on the surface but is quietly reshaping power in ways most people haven't even noticed. In the past, if you wanted to project strength, you built military bases. Tanks, airstrips, barbed wire, boots on the ground. That's how you showed the world you were serious. But today, it's not just missiles and soldiers that signal power. It's massive buildings full of blinking lights and cold air and cables that stretch under oceans. Data centers have become the new military bases, not because they carry weapons, but because they control the terrain of the modern world. Think about what a military base used to be. It was a strategic foothold. You put it somewhere you wanted influence, somewhere close to conflict zones or trade routes or allies. That same logic now applies to data centers. The only difference is that instead of defending borders, they are defending bandwidth. Instead of launching planes, they are launching packets of information. And in a world where information is the real currency of power, that matters. Let's zoom in. A hyperscale data center looks like a big warehouse. It doesn't scream importance. But what happens inside those concrete walls shapes everything: banking, communications, surveillance, elections, air training, satellite feeds, military logistics. It's all processed and routed through these facilities. If you control the data center, you don't just store information, you control who gets it, when they get it, and what happens when they don't. That makes data centers more than just infrastructure. They are strategic assets. Just like a base could be used to launch a fighter jet, a data center can be used to run a drone operation, spy on a population, or shut down a political movement. That's not some sci fi scenario. It's already happening. When the war in Ukraine broke out, one of the first things on the agenda was securing digital infrastructure, satellite internet, server backups, data sovereignty, because you can't fight a war in the 21st century without data. Now, here is the thing no one talks about. Governments are not the only ones playing this game. Big tech is in the mix too. Companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are building and operating more data centers than many governments can even afford. And they are placing them all over the map, not just for profit, but for positioning. It's not just about getting closer to customers, it's about getting closer to control. Let's say a government wants to spy on a rival, or influence public opinion, or just make sure their own systems stay online during a crisis. They can't do that without access to certain data streams. If those streams run through servers in a foreign country or through networks owned by private firms, it creates a new kind of geopolitical tension, a kind where tech firms become gatekeepers to national power and data centers become bargaining chips. This is where things start to blur because you have got public interest and private capital pulling in different directions. One side wants security, the other wants efficiency. One side wants control, and the other wants scale. And in the middle is a concrete building with humming machines and blinking servers that somehow decides the outcome of all of it. If that sounds abstract, let's ground it. The Pentagon now leases cloud services from commercial providers. Military grade operations are running on servers owned by companies whose primary goal is shareholder return. That's not a conspiracy. That's just modern logistics. But it raises a question we don't ask enough. If war is now digital and digital runs on rented servers, who holds the real power? This shift isn't just about defense either. It's about influence. The same platforms that host government data also power the recommendation engines that shape what people see, believe, and vote for. That's not a side effect, that's the territory. And just like a military base was designed to protect a population, a data center now shapes what that population experiences, often without them knowing it. And when you map out where the most critical data centers are located, you start to see a different kind of map, one that doesn't match the old world of borders and flags. It matches fiber routes, submarine cables, latency zones, and energy grids. This is the new geography of power. And it's not designed by generals, it's designed by architects and cloud engineers. That's why some governments are starting to treat data centers like they used to treat bases. They give them tax breaks, they write national strategies around them. In some places, they even put them under military protection because they know what's at stake. If your data is stored in a building you don't control, in a country that doesn't answer to you, that's a vulnerability. And in times of crisis, that vulnerability can be fatal. So the next time you see a big gray building with no signs and ton of security, you might want to ask yourself what's going on inside. Because chances are, it's not just storing selfies and spreadsheets, it's hosting the back end of modern civilization. And in an age where the battlefield is made of bits, that building might just be the most important military asset you have never heard of. Let's talk about how this new digital military logic plays out on the ground. In the old world, countries negotiated over bases. Today, they negotiate over server locations. The United States wants its cloud infrastructure on American soil. The European Union wants European user data stored in Europe. China demands that everything stay inside the Great Firewall. These are not just privacy policies. They are territorial claims, and the new territory is digital. The technical term for this is data localization, but what it really means is digital sovereignty. Governments are saying if your citizens' data lives in someone else's server farm, you don't have full control. You can't enforce your laws. You can't protect your people. That's the same logic they used to use for airspace or naval patrols, except now it's about server racks and encryption keys. This has created a whole new arms race, not for weapons, but for cloud zones. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are racing to build sovereign clouds in every region, not just to gain market share, but to satisfy governments who don't want to rely on foreign infrastructure. These are pitched as partnerships, but let's not pretend they're not neutral. A company that builds the dominant cloud platform in a country becomes part of that country's critical infrastructure. And when tensions rise, that puts the company in the middle of something it can't control. The stakes go up even more when you add artificial intelligence to the mix. Training a large AI model takes huge amounts of compute power. That compute happens in data centers. So whoever controls the compute controls the future capabilities of AI. And that in turn shapes everything from economic competition to military dominance, which means the fight for data centers isn't just about where to store your files. It's about who gets to define the future. And the line between commercial and military is vanishing fast. Look at Project Maven. That was the US Department of Defense using AI to analyze drone footage. It needed cloud infrastructure, and it turned to Google. That sparked an employee revolt, but it also showed the world that the cloud is now a defense asset. The Pentagon doesn't just need fighter jets, it needs GPU clusters and server uptime. It needs to know that when it runs mission critical AI models, they won't crash or leak or get sabotaged. And then there is the flip side. What happens when an adversary takes out your data center? Not with bombs, but with a cyber attack or power cut. You don't need to invade a country anymore to paralyze its economy. You just need to disable the cloud region its banks and hospitals rely on. And that kind of disruption can spread like wildfire. because most modern systems are interconnected. When one goes down, others follow. That's why the military is now investing in data resilience, backup center, hardened cloud, even server infrastructure in space. Yes, that's a real thing. There are companies now working on orbital data centers. The idea is simple. If your ground servers are vulnerable, put some of them in orbit. No borders, no blackouts, just 24/7 connectivity. And if that sounds like science fiction, so did drone fleets and cyber warfare just a few years ago. We are moving fast, and the cloud is going higher. But not everyone's in control of the shift. Smaller nations often don't have their own data centers, so they rely on infrastructure from bigger powers. That dependence creates pressure. If you are in a country in Africa or Southeast Asia and your national databases run on a Western cloud, what happens when these countries clash? Will your services stay up? Will your access be cut? That's a real concern, and it's turning digital alignment into a geopolitical choice. Even the physical security around data centers is starting to look like what you would see at a military site: perimeter fences, surveillance, guards. Some of those sites are built underground or in former bunkers, and the reason is obvious. If you are hosting a nation's defense logistics, energy grid, or AI models, you don't want someone walking in with a USB stick or blowing a hole in your wall. These sites are becoming hardened, and in some cases, they are being protected by actual military forces. It's no longer strange to think of a cloud outage as an act of war. In fact, in some countries, attacks on digital infrastructure now fall under national security laws. That means a cyber strike on a data center could trigger a military response, the same way a missile strike on a base cloud. That's how far we have shifted. But what's wild is how invisible it all still is. Most people drive past these buildings and have no idea what they are looking at. No idea that inside that quiet gray box is the nervous system of a country. That every email, bank transfer, video call, and government operation flows through those humming machines. It's silent, and that silence is part of that strategy. If you can operate without drawing attention, you reduce your risk. You stay in the background, but staying quiet doesn't make you neutral. When your servers become the backbone of a government's operations, or the training ground for its AI, or the platform for its propaganda, you are no longer just a tech company. You are a digital contractor in a new kind of war. Let's push this idea even further. If data centers are the new bases and the cloud is the new battlefield, then the internet itself becomes contested territory. And just like with the land or air or sea, some zones are more strategic than others. Some have better latency. Some sit near energy-rich regions. Some sit under friendly governments. Some are intentionally placed where legal loopholes offer more freedom. So just like old empires planted flags in key places to control trade and movement, digital empires are doing the same, just with servers instead of ships. Now, take a step back and look at how this shapes global alliances. Countries are not just picking military partners anymore. They are picking cloud partners. They are signing bilateral agreements not just for troop support, but for data management and cyber defense. When the United States signs a cloud deal with Japan or Australia, that's not just business. It's a strategic alignment. It says, we trust you with our data flow and you trust us with yours. That's a big deal. And then there are the fault lines, like the growing split between the Western internet and the Chinese one. China's data centers aren't just built for speed, they are built for control. Everything is monitored, filtered, shaped. That's not a bug in the system. That's a system. And when China exports its cloud infrastructure to other countries, it exports that same logic. Surveillance by design, control baked into the cables and the code. This is the digital version of exporting ideology. Instead of sending troops, you send servers. Instead of building bases, you build platforms. And those platforms become the foundations for how a society runs. Who gets access? Who gets blocked? Who is seen? What is erased? It's governance without borders. And once it's installed, it's very hard to remove. You can't talk about digital empires without talking about dependence. Because once a government or a company starts building on a particular cloud, switching isn't easy. The deeper the integration, the more expensive the exit. So the vendor becomes the territory. And that means companies like Amazon or Tencent can lock in clients the way countries used to lock in allies, not with ideology, but with architecture. That's why we are starting to hear about digital foreign policy, governments appointing cyber ambassadors, drafting data diplomacy strategies, trying to navigate a world where the cables under the ocean and the facilities in the desert hold more leverage than embassies ever did. That's a profound shift, and it's just getting started. The energy piece makes it even more complex. Data centers are huge energy consumers. They need stable power, lots of water, and cool climates. That makes them dependent on local infrastructure, which means cloud providers have to build relationships with local utilities, regulators, and governments. And those relationships turn into influence. A company that keeps the lights on for your hospitals and banks is not just a vendor, it becomes a silent partner in governance. And if something goes wrong, the fallout is immediate. There are no sirens, no explosions, just systems failing in perfect silence. The airport shut down, the banks freeze, the emergency services can't coordinate. That's what makes this new form of warfare so unnerving. It doesn't announce itself, there is no declaration, just a slow unraveling of the systems we thought were unshakable. So we circle back to the original idea. If the old world was about territory you could see, the new world is about infrastructure you can't. The real power lies in the systems that operate in the background. And the people who understand those systems, who can shape where they live and how they work, are the new power brokers. We are entering a phase where sovereignty is defined not just by borders, but by back-end control, where a state's stability might depend more on server access than military readiness, where conflict can unfold through leased cloud capacity and cyber pressure instead of boots on the ground. It's not that traditional military bases are obsolete, but they have been joined by something just as strategic and far more scalable. Data centers don't look like war machines, but they are built for control. They are sites of leverage. They are where the next great struggles over power, privacy, and influence will unfold. And if you want to understand where the world is headed, follow the cables, follow the cooling systems, follow the buildings that hum in silence. Because in the age of digital empires, it's not just armies that shape the map, it's infrastructure, invisible, networked, global, and more powerful than ever. Thanks for watching.